So we need to talk about the evolution of tetrapods. Tetrapods, four-limbed. We are tetrapods. We have four appendages. Okay. So it is believed that the first group of tetrapods that we see in the fossil record, we know, is the amphibians. So we can say that the amphibians evolved from a fish ancestor. What are the amphibians? The amphibians include like frogs and salamanders and newts. So we could ask, where did these legs come from? And do we see any what we call transitional fossils? So transitional fossils are those fossils that have some characteristic of one group and some characteristic of another group. So it's in transition. And the example that we see is an example called Titalic. And let me make sure I spelled that right. Yep. Titalic. This is a fossil. This is not something that has gone extinct, but it seems to be an intermediate between a fish and an amphibian. So if we look at the Titalic fossil, one of the characteristics, and this was a diagram that you have that's going to be sent to you, you have scales, you have fins, you have gills and lungs because you have a swim bladder that can be used as a lung. You have a neck, you have, if you're a tetrapod, you have ribs, you have a flat skull with eyes on top of the skull. And so it's thought that these creatures crawled onto land and became terrestrial from an aquatic environment. And maybe they were escaping predation, for example. Maybe they were crawling onto land to escape some of the big fish that were roaming the seas at around that time. Now, if we look at their appendages, we find that there are bones, and their bones look very similar to the arrangement of bones that we have in our limbs. So we have one long bone. We have the radius and the ulna. So we have one bone, two bones, a bunch of little bones, which are your wrist bones, and then your phalanges. And so that is one of that would also be a tetrapod characteristic. They didn't put that in there, but, oh, fin skeleton. Yes, that would be the fin skeleton is the characteristic. So this is an example of an intermediate. So let's look at these amphibians. They would be frogs, newts, salamanders, another interesting one is a legless amphibian. We have legless reptiles. We also have legless amphibians, and they're called caecilians. So that's a legless. Legless amphibian. I would imagine, I've never seen one, but I would imagine they kind of look like an earthworm, maybe. I don't know. But they have vertebrae, right? They have a jaw, they have vertebrae. So they are the caecilians. Did I miss any? I feel like I'm missing a major amphibian. When we talk about amphibians in the fossil record, they were huge, big amphibians in our fossil record. But they have subsequently, most of them have gone extinct, right? And they've been replaced by reptiles. So if we look at the characteristic of amphibians that is significant, is that they are scaleless. They lack scales, no scales. They have thin, moist skin. In fact, they can use their skin glands and produce, in some species, poison. And so we have like the poison arrow dart frog, right, which produces a lot of toxins. They have thin, moist skin. They have shellless eggs. And this means that they must return to an aquatic environment to breed. And that aquatic environment could just be a moist environment. Right? So it could be like under a log that never dries out. The salamanders do that sometimes, and sometimes they make like a saliva nest for their eggs that are developing into larvae. Sometimes frogs will use pitcher plants, right? In the rainforest, plants that capture water, and the frogs will actually use those as ephemeral pools in order to mate. Okay. So if we look at some examples of these, this is a huge amphibian, a fossil amphibian, big, right? This, I think this guy's probably holding him out a little bit to make him look bigger, but this is a giant amphibian that is still around today. This is a Chinese amphibian. Imagine, I can't even imagine. I like amphibians, but I don't know if I would like giant amphibians. So this is the salamander. This would be the frog. And this apoda, that means without feet. This is the Sicilian amphibian. So those are the amphibians. Toads, I forgot toads. Frogs and toads are also amphibians. I knew I was forgetting one of them.